Welcome to Saturdays at 7, Christian Scholars Review's conversation series with thought leaders about the academic vocation and the relationship that vocation shares with the church. My name is Todd Ream. I have the privilege of serving as the publisher for Christian Scholars Review and as the host for Saturdays at 7. I also have the privilege of serving on the faculty and the administration at Indiana Wesleyan University. Our guest is Philip Jenkins, Distinguished Professor of History at Baylor University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
As you look back over the arc of your career, in what ways, if any, has the interest historians shown in religion changed?
I've noticed very large changes through the years. I think people have come to be much more interested in religion, broadly defined, not so much the history of denominations, but of what you can call religious ways of thinking, and religion as a means of driving action. Now, we think of some very obvious moments there, like in the start of the century, we had 9/11, we had all the interest that followed that, and that was part of a much larger scheme. I think it was very interesting that if you looked at a body like political science, in the Political Science National Association, by far the fastest growing segment of that was religion and politics. So not just in history. And history, I think religion for many years used to be regarded as this sort of strange optional thing. And these days, I think people realize it is in many ways the heart of the story, whether or not one believes a word of the religious narrative ourselves. So I think I would argue that is really a revolution in the way we study in history in my lifetime.
When we look at the individuals, the lives of people that historians have chosen to study, in what ways can you see this shift that's taken place? Are there particular works, for example, you might point to?
I look at particular individuals where religion was not taken terribly seriously. It was marginal. But now, of course, we have a great series of biographies, spiritual biographies of leading figures. And you realize just how much religion was the focus of what they were doing. I have a colleague at Baylor called Barry Hankins, for example, and he wrote a volume on Woodrow Wilson and how religion drove him. Princeton has a terrific series of religious biographies, religious lives. My good friend Tim Larson has done some very good work on that. And as I say, the more you look at this, the more you realize religion is not something marginal. It's not a hobby. It is the driving motive, and it really affects the way which you read what these people say and write. You have to be consciously aware of how they use religious vocabulary, of how these ideas go back with them. It is a great case for listening.
When you think about societies or communities and studies of populations such as these, in what ways has this greater interest in religion impacted how we view them?
I'll give you one very short comment, which is I think we have made one general mistake when particularly we look at Western or European or American societies, which is we have dated secularization probably about a century or two too soon. The idea of the secularization of the European mind, the decline of magical thinking, these used to be very well known, well recognized. And the more we look at them, the more we think that is not something that happens, as the Enlightenment strikes, that well into certainly the 20th century, these are very powerful ideas. In Great Britain, for example, where I do quite a bit of work, there is an absolute watershed right about the year 1963. And if people have said, well, religion declines catastrophically after the First World War, yeah, it does about 45 years later. So I think we always tend to put these things too soon. And the other key point is the decline of institutional religion is not the same as the decline of religious worldviews, religious vocabularies, religious language. So I keep coming back to this issue of chronology.
To what then, if anything, would you attribute this change of interest, whether it's the interest in the lives of individuals or the lives and populations of particular communities or societies?
I see a great watershed in the late 1970s. The years up to then were marked by a strong belief in this idea of secularization in politics. I mean, religion was not something that anyone took seriously. And interestingly, in the late 1970s, wherever you're looking at the world, religion comes back very strong. We talk about the empire striking back. Religion strikes back very hard. And that applies whether you're looking at Judaism in Israel, Hinduism in India, evangelical Christianity in the United States, or a very traditional kind of Catholicism in much of the Catholic world. And that applies to what you might call practical politics, but that cannot affect how we look at history. If our narratives have assumed that religion is something that ceased to exist in when? The First World War, the 1950s, whatever. And suddenly religion is back. Oh, or rather, religion never went away. We just weren't seeing it. Yeah, as the phrase goes, if I hadn't believed it, I wouldn't have seen it with my own eyes. In other words, that it's our ideology, approaches in that way that affect what we're actually seeing on the ground. When we look closer in the ground, we see by any number of criteria, any number of sources of evidence, that religion never went away. People just stopped looking at it.
In terms of how students then look at it and encounter it in the classroom, then, for example, 30 or 40 years ago, in what ways has it changed the undergraduate education?
When you look at 30 or 40 years ago, I think a lot of people who kind of believed in religious approaches, they accepted these approaches very seriously, but they tended to conceal these ideas or regard them as not something they could almost like raise in polite society. And over time, they realized, well, yes, absolutely, they could. And this was actually a very good way of understanding that they were part of often a religious culture, and they assumed it was confined to them. And that was certainly true in large secular universities. A university like my own, like Baylor, was obviously much more open to this. So I think people have, pardon the expression, come out of the closet much more in using their own religious understandings broadly defined. And again, I draw a distinction between adherence to institutional religion and following religious ways of thinking. And religion, including somewhat superstitious, esoteric, whatever, we certainly cannot ignore and need to treat very seriously.
In terms of this treatment, then, for graduate students who are being prepared to do the work of history, in what ways, if any, has this change of interest impacted the historical methods to which they are introduced?
Yeah, very important. One lesson is perhaps to take what is obvious out there, what is presented most directly, and not assume that there must be these great social, political, financial agendas behind them, that people really are acting in these religious ways because of belief that it is impossible to separate that. One idea I always try and get across when I'm dealing with particularly graduate students is the idea of what I call providentialism. A very common idea that people have that when disastrous things happen in the world, there are wars, there are plagues, famine, diseases, that this is because God or the gods are angry. And conversely, times of blessing reflect the pleasure of the divine. That may be an obvious statement, but that providential approach drives so much conduct through history And when you're teaching about, for instance, the early modern period, the medieval period, you start from that. That is an essential idea, an essential way of understanding the world. And you think, how long in history does that continue? I would say certainly into the 20th century. I mean, I did a lot of work on the First World War. We have a lot of kind of ethnographic evidence about what people actually believed and thought during the First World War. It actually looks like they're living in the 17th century. They believe these very, what shall I say, not just religious ideas, but superstitious ideas. And you can look at some of the things they're doing and believing, and you think, is this the 30 Years' War of the 1620s and 30s, or is it the First World War? And that is an important way, that kind of providential approach, that openness to superstitious ideas broadly defined, continues way longer. And when a student comes to me and says, I've got this set of ideas, set of behaviors, and I'm almost embarrassed to describe it, I say, well, no, don't. I would expect to see exactly that. People are telling the truth as they see it. Modernity strikes a lot later, I think, than people think. And in many parts of the world, we are assuredly not there yet.
Thank you. I want to transition now to asking you about your own formation as an historian. You spent 8 years at the University of Cambridge's Clare College, the second oldest surviving college at Cambridge. And over the course of those years, you earned a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. But at what point in time did you discern the practice of history would prove critical to how you understood your vocation?
Even before that, since I was probably 11 or 12 years old, what I was doing was history, very broadly defined. And when does history start? Is it 5 years ago? Is it 10 years ago? Is it 100 years ago? For me, it was always, in a sense, 10 minutes ago, because historical methodology applied whether I was looking at a document from 100 years ago or yesterday's newspaper. So, in other words, it was a way of approaching the world, a critical way of understanding evidence and documents, which is the core of what historians do. And by the time I reached university, this was what I did. There really was not really a whole lot of option in that.
Yeah.
So what I was doing really all the way through my teens, my education consisted of strengthening, gathering material for that approach. I did not consciously think, I am arming myself for a vocation or anything like that. But that is the way I worked that out. And I did something very useful, which is I read very widely, very extensively, in all sorts of fiction and material. And I learned a skill that has stood me in very good stead ever since, which is the ability to listen to and appreciate language. The words that people use often contain so much ideology, so many ideas, their ways of understanding the world. And the more you know about that, the more you can understand the historical context. You watch a film and look at how people talk and how people act. And what you're doing is studying history. And then, Cambridge just offered such a perfect environment for me. Then in a sense, you learn to find the official correct names for what you have been doing all along. And you learn the labels, but in a very generous, supportive environment. Really could not have been better.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about how you intersected with that generous support and in the ways that it formed you?
Well, I would cite one person who is a scholar of demography and historical demography called Roger Schofield, deceased some years ago. At the time in the 1970s, he was the epitome of the cool academic. He was married to a top flight actress, and he was a cool person. He was also in the 1970s somebody who was working with computers. Can you imagine anything more remarkable? But what was so interesting about him was he gave me this framework and this vocabulary for understanding history through the lens of population, changes in population, demography, disease, understanding these hard material facts that could be measured and which gave the foundation for understanding pretty much everything else. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Climate, Catastrophe, and Faith, which is about how the history of religion is shaped by changing climate, disease, and so on. And I very explicitly dedicated this to Roger Schofield and what he had taught me literally 45 or 50 years ago. And I just so appreciated those life lessons, which I think many other historians are just starting to understand today. I was blessed.
Yeah.
And I had this, magnificent teacher. And there were others, but I always remember that. And at the time, of course, he's teaching things nobody else knows. It would be 30 years ago before anyone regarded that as at all normal. And these days you look back and say, oh, it's very, familiar, regular, normal stuff. Not back then, it wasn't.
Yeah. And he was the epitome of cool academic, too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This is going to be a first that I'm going to tuck away, actually, and use for some personal inspiration.
Very good.
Thank you. Are there any authors that you encountered during that time who also left their imprint on you?
I'm going to use one very odd example that might sound surprising. We're talking about cutting edge scholarship in a way, and there were people who were very highly regarded. I fell in love with an author from a much older era who was the novelist Sir Walter Scott. And we think of him in terms of books about, Highlanders and these very romantic books. If you ever read Sir Walter Scott, he edited and often owned all the official documents that we use as sources on that period. If he said something happened on February the 13th, 1679 at 4 p.m., it happened on that day. He was a superb historian. And he had the history absolutely perfectly. And you realized that often the best way of presenting a history was through this imaginative context that cares absolutely for reconstructing the exact language, the thought world. And there's one book particularly, which I know of his, called Old Mortality, which is about the rebellions of extreme Puritans in Scotland in the 1670s and 1680s. And by the time you've read it, you've had a magnificent object lesson in how history works, how documents exist, and how an imaginative author can take that and present it as a novel while remaining totally within the realm of excellent archival history. And that is very humbling. And it also sends a lesson about how you should communicate. If you cannot communicate your findings, your efforts are void. And some of the best history that you will find is in the form of historical novels. And so Scott had a really powerful impact on me, and I could cite many other cases. He wrote dozens and dozens of books. And sometimes you would think, can I check this fact? And you go off and check it, and you realize that you're going to a book edited by Sir Walter Scott. So, he was so impressive in that way. There are any number of others, but I always use Scott as an example. Wonderful author and hugely influential in the 19th century. Also, in America, you could write many books about his impact on 19th century America.
Thank you. Following the conclusion of your studies at Cambridge, you are appointed an assistant professor of criminal justice at Penn State University's University Park campus. And several of your earliest books focused on crime, including serial homicide, and perhaps one of the first comprehensive treatments of the Clergy Sexual Abuse Crisis, a work called Pedophiles and Priests, Anatomy of a Social Crisis, that Oxford University Press published in 1996. In what ways did your commitment to the practice of history lead you to a research agenda that was related to and focused at certain points on criminal behavior during those years?
Yeah, this was partly what you might call opportunism, in the sense that these subjects arose. One golden rule for me is very often people try and understand history and speak as if they understand history, but they don't. So, for example, if somebody says, you mentioned serial murder, in the 1980s, there were all these serial murderers and nothing like this has ever existed before. That's a historical statement. And you can test it. And my whole point is to be, in a sense, a social scientist, and I test evidence. And when you test it, you realize that serial murder in American history has come and gone. There is great attention to it in some eras, not in others. And the attention that is paid to it depends on some very familiar factors, such as concerns about what? Race, gender, sexuality, and these kind of concerns. And so when you look at what looks like a true crime topic, what you're actually pursuing is very good social history. So it allowed me to incorporate two different aspects at the same time. One is that social science issue, studying an issue, but also at the same time, trying to study it through good history, which I would claim I was using and other people were not. When you make a comment like, oh, this is unprecedented, we've never been here before, that is a historical comment that can be tested.
Right.
And with the clergy sex abuse issue, again, there was a statement, there was a view that this is all part of what is wrong with the Catholic Church. It is because of the celibacy of the clergy. And when you look at it historically, you learn certain things that really kind of undermines that idea, and particularly a whole series of factors that change about 1980 in American life, which means that there's going to be a great deal of attention to clergy abuse, and it is going to hit the Catholic Church, whether or not there is more of a problem there than in other institutions. So that was my my basic argument. I also wrote on interesting issue of crime on the internet. Got to an interesting matter of evidence and sources. How can you write the history of the internet, which is such a recent phenomenon? Well, now you can.
Yeah.
Back in 2000, well, it was all very recent. But I come back to my basic idea. I'm a historian. I study documents, I study texts, I try and interpret them and present them in a way that will be understandable to people. And that doesn't matter whether you're dealing with something that happened in 1798 or 1998.
As the Edwin Earle Sparks Professor of Humanities Emeritus, you left Penn State in 2012 for service now at Baylor University as a Distinguished Professor of History. Would you describe the discernment process that led you to make the transition from University Park to Waco?
Sure. Penn State is, it's a world-class university. It so happened that I left at the time of this horrific Jerry Sandusky scandal.
Yeah.
And that was coincidence. That was not kind of a causal factor. What had happened that was new was not even so much Baylor, but within Baylor, there was this organization called the Institute for Study of Religion, ISR, led by Byron Johnson, which was just offering such spectacular opportunities in terms of, well, first of all, I could do all these events on the history of religion. I could bring in any number of really distinguished speakers. I could organize these great events. I could pursue any research I wanted. And whenever I would ask my head there, who is Brian Johnson, can I do this? And the answer was absolutely always, yes, certainly. Go ahead. No was not in his vocabulary. So Baylor's a wonderful institution, but it was specifically that ISR that was the kind of Aladdin's cave for me. And it's remained very much like that since. Obviously, during the pandemic, we couldn't organize so much programming. We couldn't bring in people in the same way. But, I've managed to research and work with people, terrific range of colleagues. So the move was not so much from Penn State to Baylor as from Penn State to Baylor and ISR, and
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
the
Yeah.
enormous opportunity. I still have huge regard for Penn State as a university, great departments, great education. But in terms of what it could offer me, it
Mm.
worked far better with ISR. And I do confess that for my last year or so when I was in Penn State, I did have a poster on my door that quoted Davy Crockett's words that the rest of you can go to hell, I will go to Texas, which might suggest more of a disenchantment than might be, but I couldn't resist it.
Well, hopefully some of your more lighthearted colleagues
Indeed.
took that for what you meant it then. In what ways, if any, did Penn State contribute to your understanding uh, of the vocation of a historian? And then how does that compare with your formation since in terms of being at Baylor and part of ISR?
I was very blessed. For many years, I was in, as you say, a criminal justice department, administration of justice. And again, I had the great blessing of being in a department that basically said, as long as I was producing good scholarship, nobody really tried to tell me what to do. So I was teaching courses on the usual criminal justice type topics of terrorism and violent crime and so on. Greatly enjoying that teaching, but I could do research on whatever I wanted, and that allowed me to integrate my historical approaches freely. And I just give you an example there. I've done great deal of work through the years on terrorism. Think about it. How do you understand terrorism? And one thing I tried to do was to approach it historically. And there is a very large history of terrorism, of the vocabulary of terrorism, of movements of terrorism. And I published a book on this called Images of Terror, which I'm always pleased with because it didn't come out from absolutely the greatest or most visible press in the world, but it got the best reviews I've ever had for any book ever.
Yeah.
And because of that kind of historical depth. And I'm so grateful to the head we had at that point. He was a very charismatic figure, a man called Daniel Meyer Katkin, now deceased. Just a wonderful scholar. In his view was, you're doing good scholarship, it's history, fine, go ahead and do it. So I've always been blessed in that way.
Thank you. I want to shift now to asking you about more of the arc of the work that you've done. And I want to start by asking you about your most recent book, uh, which is Kingdoms of This World, How Empires Have Made and Remade Religion, published by Baylor University Press just last year in 2024. What compelled you to pursue that project, and what do you hope audience members get from it?
Every book I write, and I've written some 30 odd books, has in a sense grown out of one or two previous books.
Mm.
And so in the previous few years, I'd written on a number of topics such as demography and religion, climate and religion. And as I looked at the history, it occurred to me there was one really big concept that was a terrific driving force in shaping religion in all eras, and that was empire. So in a sense, it was the next contribution in that series, demography, climate, empire. And I ranged very widely in that. So I talked about the way Indian empires had promoted Buddhism. I talked about the way Buddhism, the way in which Christianity had become a global religion as an offshoot of the British Empire and the French and the Portuguese and so on. And if you're going to write a book on that, then you don't just enumerate the facts. You try and say, why? what are the factors about empire that makes it such a prime driver for different kinds of religion? And so I thought about that, and that drove that book. It's in a sense, a two-sided book. It's how religion has made empire, and empire has made religion. And I would stress, something that is maybe a little bit surprising for Americans to think about. Historically, empire is not an optional add-on. It is the default form of government in most eras. Your ancestors, the ancestors of everyone you know, were either the subjects of an empire who made an empire, or they were ruled by an empire. And that's a pretty universal statement. As I wrote the book, it was running out of control in terms of length. And the great thing that I could not fit in on that was American empire and American faith. Religion made American empire, how American empire made religion. And that is the book I'm finishing right now.
I was just going to ask, does that then lead to the next book then, as you were sort of describing how one book leads to the next then?
Always.
These themes that you've seen and that you've focused on, is there one book, if you look back over the arc of your career, that was sort of more definitive maybe of the way you've gone about your work as a historian than maybe some of the others, or maybe even 2 or 3 books that you would point to?
Yeah. The one that clearly has had by far the biggest impact was my Next Christendom book, which came out in 2002, many centuries ago. And again, the reason I wrote that was because people were making statements about the direction of religion. And in my view, those statements were radically ahistorical. They were based on a fairly narrow view of Western Euro-American history. But when you looked at things in a global African, Asian, Latin American sense, you just saw things in an absolutely different lens. So partly that is shifting the geographical focus, but it is also shifting the chronology. So I'm trying to say, what would Christianity look like if you looked at it from the year 1600, 1000, for example? And the answer is something that is very, very different from any of the stereotypes. My achievement there was taking such a vast range of possible material and successfully boiling it down to something that was an accessible lens. That was very hard. Often, the temptation to run into 800 pages is a problem. I've always followed a golden rule of writing, which is, what is this book about? This book is about 240 pages. That is a golden rule. And Next Christendom then developed into another book on uses of the Bible, another book on the history of early Christianity in Asia, another book on this, another book on this. Each book generates its successor. But if there's a single landmark, I would have to go back to Next Christendom. If I look into the future and see my obituary, it begins with the line, Philip Jenkins, who wrote the Next Christendom. And that's what I'll be remembered for, if I'm remembered.
Thank you very much. Before we close our conversation then today, I want to transition to asking you more formally now about your understanding of the academic vocation. And we've talked about some of the characteristics in particular that you believe historians need to hold tightly to in terms of how they practice their work. But what characteristics, qualities, or even practices do you find are most fundamental to how you exercise history? And in working with graduate students, do you hope to pass on to them?
One, everything depends on evidence, obviously. One key point is the selection of evidence and the temptation to say, this is a wonderful story, but how representative is it? And that is why I benefited through the years from working so closely with social scientists. And their key concepts are reproducible, falsifiable, if somebody looked at this topic, are they likely to be able to reproduce your evidence, or can they prove it's wrong? You can never spend too much time with the archives. And the other thing that has been increasingly crucial for me through the years is to situate any historical study in as broad a cultural field as possible, which means drawing on literature, popular culture, visual arts. So, for example, if you are working on the 1940s, for instance, a very rich historical era, you read the archives, yes, you read the newspapers, you have to know what is happening in film, novels, cartoons and comics, incidentally, a magnificent resource. And that is something that I'm always trying to drive home to students. And I find them very receptive to this. And initially they'll say, but that's not really history. And you say, well, yeah, it really is. And if anyone responds and says that is not proper history, then they can be duly ignored. And it is so much. You can never read too widely in the fiction, and not just the kind of elite literary fiction, but in the genres. Work on the 1940s. I read westerns. I read horror fiction. I read science fiction. Fun in their own right, but also immensely valuable for the way that people speak and think, as a way of assessing the language in which these documents are composed. So, and as I say, a lot of that may initially seem impressionistic. And how do you then frame it in such a way that you're presenting a picture that is reproducible, that can be tested, that can be falsified? Imagine you're in a court where somebody says, well, you claim to be an expert witness. How can you prove this? Well, this is how I do it. This is how I show it can be reproducible as real science. So those are some of the rules that I would use very strongly, and particularly in any kind of religious history of religions, denominations, broadly defined.
When practicing history in the manner that you just described, then, what intellectual and moral virtues do you believe are most important for historians to cultivate?
The ability to be self-critical, a major dose of professional modesty, and to suggest where I or we can go wrong in looking at a document. The modesty that will make us think this is a wonderful document. But is it actually worth anything? Is it actually representative? So that kind of modesty is so important. And also, if you're talking about virtues, and this one I suppose we'll ascribe to, a kind of humility about the topic that we're writing about, because we always assume that what we write about is the most important thing. There never has been anything like this before or since. I can guarantee, yes, there has.
I read a grant proposal just this morning where somebody lobbied that it was the most important study in that field to date.
I hope you gave them the money.
How could I pass or do my little part in terms of being a reviewer? So, for historians, then, what vices, if any, do you believe are most important to confront? And perhaps it starts with what we just were joking about there.
Yeah. One of the most difficult to navigate is what's sometimes called presentism. But by which I mean the idea that we view all these ideas, all these documents through our own assumptions today. Now, we have to be aware of those. So, for example, if we are marketing a proposal to a publisher, what that publisher will want to know is, how can we make this sound as if it's speaks to an audience from 2025? And that is very fine. But often, if you look at these, you have to be aware, there's a famous phrase from H.E. Bates, the English novelist. The past is a different country. They do things differently there, and they really do. And the other one I find again and again is there really is nothing new under the sun. If you look at a particular era, it is startling how much you can find the same thing happened 20 years before that, 40 years before that. This is not in terms of great history, but I work a lot in the 1890s. It's a fascinating era. One thing that's very funny there is the popular slang of that era. If you ever read like a contemporary novel, is straight from the 1960s. So a girl is cool. She is out of sight. She is far out. And you think, well, yeah, it's around like 1967. And, people in the past are different. They are not stupid. They also know a very standard range of possible responses and interpretations, which we might be tempted to dismiss as, the ignorance of the past. I spent a lot of time working on the history of the discovery of ancient texts and scriptures. And look at the years around 1910, their common attitudes to like Gnostic Gospels are pretty much exactly precisely what we would have today in terms of how many of them there were, how significant they were. Oh, there are all these different Gospels. Well, welcome to the world of 1910. Presentism would be the short answer to that question. There are many others, but that's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. For our final question for our conversation today, then I want to ask you, in what ways do you believe historians can be of greater service to the church, and perhaps the church can be of greater service to historians?
Well, it gets back to what I'm saying. Very often when a church, the church, makes a statement about contemporary realities, it is assuming that conditions described are wholly new, we've never been here before. The churches, by definition, have got a couple of thousand years possible experience on which to draw. And they really need to draw on those records, on those understandings. How did we deal with situations like this in the past? These are not new. So I think historians can be of enormous significance to understanding debates in the church. And again, we run into this danger of presentism. There's always a risk that people will look back and say, oh, this is just like we face today. And we'll see something that is just like what I happen to believe as my partisan cause today. Well, maybe and maybe not. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you very much. Our guest has been Philip Jenkins, Distinguished Professor of History at Baylor University. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights and wisdom with us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us for Saturdays at 7. Christian Scholars Review's conversation series with thought leaders about the academic vocation and the relationship that vocation shares with the church. We invite you to join us again next week for Saturdays at 7.